Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so where do I even begin? I guess I should start by saying I was never a big online dating person. I always preferred meeting people in real life, through friends or at events. But after a really messy breakup, my best friend convinced me to download Tinder. She said it would be a fun distraction, a way to meet new people and get my mind off things. I was hesitant, but she wore me down, and before I knew it, I had a profile with some semi-decent pictures and a witty bio. The first few weeks were pretty uneventful. Lots of swiping, some matches, a few boring conversations that went nowhere. I almost deleted the app a few times, but then I matched with Liam. He was cute, had a good sense of humor in his profile, and his picture seemed genuine. We started chatting, and it was actually fun. He was easy to talk to. We had a lot in common, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We texted for a few days before moving to phone calls, and those went well too. He was smart, funny, and seemed like a really good guy. After about a week of talking, we decided to meet up for a date. He suggested a local coffee shop, which seemed like a safe and casual option. I told my friend where I was going and who I was meeting, just in case. I even shared his profile with her and sent her his phone number. I know, super cautious, but I figured it was better to be safe than sorry. The date started out great. Liam was just as charming in person as he was on the phone. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say, and I felt really comfortable around him. He even walked me back to my car afterward, which I thought was a nice touch. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We went to the movies, had dinner at a nice restaurant, and even went for a hike in the park. Each time, I felt like I was getting to know him better, and I was really starting to like him. He was thoughtful, kind, and attentive. He always made sure I felt safe and comfortable. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He would ask me questions about my daily routine, like what time I left for work, what route I took, and when I usually got home. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just trying to make conversation. But then the questions became more specific, more personal. He wanted to know about my apartment building, my neighbors, and my security system. I started to feel uneasy. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the feeling wouldn't go away. There were other things too. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I would be. Like the time I went to a yoga class with my friend, and he just happened to be there. Or the time I was grabbing lunch at a cafe near my office, and he walked in like it was no big deal. Each time, he acted like it was a coincidence, like he just happened to be in the area. But it was happening too often to be a coincidence. I started to think he was following me. I confronted him about it one night after a date. I tried to be calm and rational, but I was also scared. I asked him if he had been following me, and he denied it vehemently. He said I was being crazy, that I was imagining things. He acted hurt and offended that I would even accuse him of something like that. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying. I decided to take a break from seeing him, to give myself some space to think things through. I told him I was busy with work and couldn't see him for a while. He seemed disappointed, but he respected my decision. I thought taking a break would ease my anxiety, but it only made things worse. I started noticing more things, little things that made me feel like I was being watched. A strange car parked outside my apartment building, a shadow moving in the corner of my eye, the feeling that someone was always just behind me. I was terrified. I started having trouble sleeping. I lost my appetite, and I couldn't focus at work. I felt like I was losing my mind. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. One night, I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when I heard a noise outside my window. It sounded like someone was tapping on the glass. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly got out of bed and crept over to the window. I peeked through the blinds, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Liam was standing outside my apartment building, staring up at my window. He was holding a bouquet of flowers and a small box. He had this creepy smile plastered on his face. I slammed the blind shut and stumbled back, shaking like a leaf. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was really stalking me. I ran to my phone and called the police. I told them everything that had been happening, about Liam, about the questions, about the coincidences, about the feeling of being watched. They took my report and said they would send someone to check it out. While I waited for the police to arrive, I peeked out the window again. Liam was still there, standing outside my building, staring up at my window. He hadn't moved. I felt a surge of anger and fear. I couldn't let him do this to me. I couldn't let him control my life. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet and ran out of my apartment. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to confront him. I had to make him stop. When I got outside, Liam was still there, just like I had left him. He took one look at me, and his smile grew wider. "I just wanted to surprise you," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "I brought you flowers and a little gift." "Get away from me," I said, my voice trembling. "Stay away from me." "Why are you being like this?" he said, his eyes widening. "I thought we had something special." "You're crazy," I said, raising the baseball bat. "Stay away from me, or I'll call the police." "You already called them," he said, his smile fading. "They're not coming." That's when I snapped. I swung the baseball bat with all my might, hitting him in the arm. He yelped in pain and stumbled backward. I swung again, hitting him in the leg. He fell to the ground, clutching his leg and screaming. I stood over him, panting, the baseball bat still raised. I wanted to hit him again, to make him pay for what he had done to me. But then I saw the look in his eyes, the fear, the pain, the confusion, and I realized that I was no better than him. I dropped the baseball bat and backed away. The police arrived a few minutes later and arrested Liam. He was charged with stalking and harassment. I later found out that he had a history of stalking women he met online. The whole experience was terrifying, but it taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating. You never really know who you're talking to on the other side of a screen. It's important to be careful, to trust your instincts, and to never ignore the red flags. I still use dating apps sometimes, but I'm much more cautious now. I always meet people in public places for the first few dates. I tell my friends where I'm going and who I'm meeting, and I never share too much personal information online. What happened with Liam was a nightmare, but it made me stronger. It taught me to trust myself, to stand up for myself, and to never let anyone control my life. I hope sharing my story will help other women stay safe and avoid similar experiences. It's not worth it to meet someone. If you feel uneasy, listen to your gut. It's weird, isn't it, how a dating app can turn into something straight out of a thriller. Like, Tinder is supposed to be this fun, casual way to meet people, maybe find a date, maybe find something more. But sometimes it throws you a curveball, so wild it leaves you questioning everything. This isn't a story I usually share, not because it's particularly gruesome or dramatic in the traditional sense, but because it chipped away at something fundamental in me, a sense of safety that I haven't fully recovered. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, and living in a new city. I didn't know anyone, and honestly, I was lonely. Tinder seemed like the obvious solution. Swiping felt harmless, a low-stakes way to put myself out there. I went on a few mediocre dates, nothing memorable, mostly just awkward conversations and forced smiles. Then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was intriguing. Not overly polished or trying too hard, just a few candid photos and a bio that said, "Looking for someone to explore the city with." He seemed normal enough. Cute even. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything. Our favorite books, our dreams for the future, our fears. It was like he was reading my mind sometimes. He was a bartender and a musician, artsy with a side of bad boy energy. Exactly the kind of guy I usually went for. We met up a week later at a dive bar in my neighborhood. He was even more charming in person. We laughed, we flirted, and by the end of the night, I was completely smitten. He walked me home, and we kissed goodnight at my door. It was perfect. Textbook. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on dates constantly, museums, concerts, late-night walks by the river. He introduced me to his friends, who were all equally cool and welcoming. I felt like I had finally found my place in this new city. Liam was attentive, thoughtful, and made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. He always knew how to make me laugh, how to make me feel special. It was intoxicating. But then, things started to change. Subtle shifts at first, things I brushed off as me being paranoid. He started canceling plans at the last minute, claiming he was busy with work or band practice. He became less responsive to my texts, sometimes taking hours to reply. When we were together, he seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always deflected, saying I was imagining things, that he was just stressed. I wanted to believe him, but something felt off. My gut was telling me something wasn't right, but I ignored it, clinging to the image of the perfect guy I thought I had found. Then came the nightmares. Vivid, disturbing dreams where I was being followed, watched. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, convinced that someone was in my apartment. I started sleeping with a light on, checking the locks on my doors and windows obsessively. One night, I woke up to a strange noise coming from outside my window. I peered through the blinds and saw a figure standing across the street, shrouded in shadows. I couldn't make out who it was, but they were just standing there, staring at my apartment. I slammed the blinds shut and ran back to bed, shaking with fear. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I know, it sounds cliché, but I needed to know if I was crazy or if something was really going on. I started with his social media. His profiles were pretty bare, not a lot of personal information. I tried searching his name online, but nothing came up. It was like he didn't exist before Tinder. Then I decided to ask his friends about him. Casually, of course. I didn't want to seem like I was interrogating them. But every time I brought up his past, they would get vague, changing the subject or saying they didn't know him that well. It was weird. Really weird. That's when I found it. Buried deep in his Instagram, a tagged photo from a few years back. It was a group shot from a party, and in the background, I recognized a familiar face. A girl I had gone to high school with, someone I hadn't seen in years. I remembered vaguely that she'd moved away with her family. I messaged her, asking if she knew Liam. Her response sent a shiver down my spine. Liam? You mean different name? Yeah, I knew him. He was troubled. Stay away from him. Troubled? What did that mean? I pressed her for more information, but she refused to say anything else, just repeated her warning. Stay away. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do, who to trust. Was I in danger? Was Liam really who he said he was? I decided to confront him. I called him and asked if we could talk. He seemed hesitant, but eventually agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the next day. The next morning, I woke up early, my stomach churning with anxiety. I got ready slowly, trying to calm my nerves. As I was about to leave, I noticed something strange. My front door was slightly ajar. I froze. I knew I had locked it the night before. Had someone been in my apartment? My heart pounded in my chest as I cautiously pushed the door open. The apartment seemed empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I rushed to the coffee shop, my mind racing. I arrived early and sat down at a table, trying to compose myself. Liam was late, really late. I texted him, but he didn't respond. After an hour, I gave up. He wasn't coming. As I was about to leave, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure standing across the street, watching me. It was him, Liam. He was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to disguise himself, but I knew it was him. He didn't make a move, just stood there, staring. I felt a surge of panic. I quickly got up and walked in the opposite direction, trying to lose him in the crowd. I could feel his eyes on me, following my every move. I ran all the way back to my apartment, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I slammed the door shut and locked it, collapsing against the wall in fear. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped, vulnerable. Then I heard a noise, a soft tapping sound coming from my window. I slowly turned around and saw him, Liam. He was standing outside my window, on the fire escape, staring at me with a chilling smile. I screamed and ran to the phone, dialing 911. But before I could say anything, he smashed the window and climbed inside. I dropped the phone and backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. Don't be afraid, he said, his voice soft and menacing. I just want to talk. I don't remember much of what happened next. It's all a blur of fear and confusion. I remember him talking, saying things that didn't make sense. He told me he had been watching me for weeks, that he knew everything about me. He said he was obsessed with me, that he couldn't live without me. Then the police arrived. I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer and closer. Liam panicked and tried to run, but the police caught him. They dragged him out of my apartment, kicking and screaming. I sat there in shock, trembling, tried to make sense of what had just happened. The police took my statement, and then I went to the hospital. I was physically unharmed, but emotionally, I was a wreck. It turned out that Liam wasn't his real name. He had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been using Tinder to find victims, preying on vulnerable women. The girl from my high school had been one of his targets. He was eventually arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, and breaking and entering. I testified against him in court, reliving the nightmare over and over again. He was found guilty and sentenced to several years in prison. But even though he's behind bars, I still can't shake the feeling of fear. I still have nightmares. I still check the locks on my doors and windows obsessively. I still look over my shoulder when I'm walking alone at night. Tinder. This event happened years ago, and I still have issues with it. Like if I see some guy that looks like him, it puts me on edge. I don't use online dating anymore. The app took something from me, a part of myself that I may never get back. I will never forget how close I was to death. My heart still races when I remember. It started like any other Tuesday. Wake up, hit snooze twice, stumble to the coffee maker, and then the ritualistic scroll through Tinder while the caffeine slowly kicked in. I wasn't expecting much. Tinder had become more of a mindless habit than a genuine quest for connection. The matches were usually bland, the conversations even blander, and the dates, well, let's just say my dating life was a barren wasteland. My profile was pretty standard. A few semi-flattering photos, carefully curated of course, a witty bio about my love for hiking and disdain for pineapple on pizza, and a clear statement that I was looking for good vibes and good company. Ambiguous enough, right? So there I was, bleary-eyed and clutching my mug, swiping left and right with the practiced ease of a seasoned Tinder veteran. A few maybes, a lot of nos, and then ding, a new match. I clicked on the profile. His name was Alex. Alex was different, not the usual gym selfie or shirtless beach pic that flooded the app. His photos were candid, natural. One showed him laughing with friends at a brewery, another hiking in the mountains, and a third reading a book in a cozy-looking coffee shop. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and a bio that simply said, "Looking for someone to share adventures with." Intriguing. I messaged him. "Hey Alex, that coffee shop looks amazing. Any recommendations?" He responded almost immediately. "Hey, that's the Book Nook downtown. Their iced lattes are life-changing. You should check it out sometime." And so began our digital courtship. We talked for hours that day, and the next, and the next. We discovered a shared love for obscure indie movies, a passion for volunteering at animal shelters, and a mutual disdain for small talk. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited. After a week of constant texting, Alex suggested we meet up. He proposed a hike to a local waterfall, followed by lunch at a nearby cafe. It sounded perfect. I spent the entire morning getting ready, agonizing over what to wear, and trying to convince myself that I wasn't setting my expectations too high. The hike was even better than I imagined. The waterfall was breathtaking. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and Alex was even more charming in person. He was attentive, funny, and made me feel completely at ease. We laughed, we shared stories, and we even held hands as we navigated a particularly rocky section of the trail. It felt right. Lunch at the cafe was equally enjoyable. We lingered for hours, talking about everything and nothing, completely lost in each other's company. As we walked back to our cars, I felt a pang of disappointment that the day was coming to an end. "I had an amazing time today," I said, smiling shyly. "Me too," Alex replied, his eyes sparkling. "We should do this again soon." "Definitely," I agreed. He leaned in and kissed me. It was a perfect first kiss, sweet, gentle, and full of promise. I drove home with butterflies in my stomach and a goofy grin plastered on my face. Maybe, just maybe, I had finally found something real on Tinder. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates, laughter, and shared experiences. We went to concerts, explored new restaurants, and even took a weekend trip to the coast. I was falling hard and fast. Alex seemed to feel the same way. He was affectionate, supportive, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. Then, things started to get strange. It began subtly. Alex started being less responsive to my texts, sometimes taking hours or even days to reply. He canceled a couple of dates at the last minute, citing work emergencies or sudden illnesses. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that everyone has their ups and downs, but a nagging feeling of unease started to creep into my mind. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I stumbled upon a photo of Alex with another woman. They were at a concert, laughing and holding hands. The photo was posted a week earlier, on a night that Alex had told me he was too sick to see me. My heart sank. I felt a wave of anger, betrayal, and confusion wash over me. Was he seeing someone else? Had our entire relationship been a lie? I wanted to confront him, but I didn't know how. I decided to do some digging. I started by searching for Alex online. I found a few social media profiles, but nothing that shed any light on his situation. Then, I stumbled upon a news article about a string of missing persons cases in the area. All of the victims were young women, and all of them had been last seen after going on dates with men they had met on Tinder. A chill ran down my spine. Was it possible? Could Alex be involved? The thought was terrifying, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I decided to confide in my best friend, Sarah. I told her everything: the sudden changes in Alex's behavior, the Instagram photo, the news article about the missing women. Sarah listened patiently, her face growing increasingly grim. "This is serious," she said when I finished. "You need to be careful. I think you should go to the police." I hesitated. I didn't want to believe that Alex could be capable of something so horrible, but I couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. I agreed to go to the police, but I insisted on doing some more investigating on my own first. I needed to know the truth. The next day, I decided to pay a visit to Alex's apartment. He had told me where he lived, and I figured I could snoop around a bit while he was at work. I knew it was a risky move, but I was desperate for answers. I drove to his apartment complex, parked a few blocks away, and walked the rest of the way. I found his apartment number and knocked on the door, hoping that he wouldn't be home. To my relief, there was no answer. I tried the doorknob. To my surprise, it was unlocked. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and slipped inside. The apartment was dark and smelled faintly of incense. It was sparsely furnished, almost sterile. There were no personal touches, no photos, no books, nothing that gave any indication of who Alex really was. I started searching the apartment, opening drawers, rifling through closets, and checking under furniture. I found nothing of interest in the living room or the bedroom. Then I went into the bathroom. That's when I found it. Hidden behind the shower curtain, taped to the wall, were dozens of photos. Photos of women. Photos of the missing women from the news article. My blood ran cold. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. I stumbled back, my body shaking uncontrollably. As I turned to leave, I heard a noise behind me. A door creaking open. I froze. "Looking for something?" a voice said. I turned around slowly. Alex was standing in the doorway, his eyes cold and empty. He was holding a knife. "I knew you were too good to be true," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He smiled. "You have no idea." He lunged at me. I screamed and ducked, narrowly avoiding the knife. I scrambled backwards, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. He advanced on me, his eyes fixed on mine, his face contorted in a mask of rage. I knew I was in serious danger. I had to get out of there. I ran towards the front door, but Alex was too fast. He grabbed me from behind, his hand clamping over my mouth. I struggled against him, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the apartment and threw me onto the bed. I landed hard, my head hitting the wall. I felt a sharp pain in my skull, and everything started to go blurry. Alex straddled me, pinning me down. He raised the knife above his head, his eyes gleaming with madness. "This is how it ends," he said, his voice a low growl. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. Then I heard a loud crash. The door burst open, and Sarah rushed into the room, wielding a fire extinguisher. She swung it with all her might, hitting Alex in the head. He slumped forward, unconscious. Sarah rushed to my side, helping me to my feet. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. I think so," I stammered, my head spinning. "We called the police." They arrived within minutes and took Alex into custody. I spent the next few hours at the police station, giving my statement and answering questions. It turned out that Alex was a serial killer. He had been using Tinder to lure his victims, and he had been getting away with it for years. The police were able to recover the bodies of the missing women from a hidden location on his property. I was lucky to be alive. If it hadn't been for Sarah, I would have been another victim. The experience changed me forever. I'm now hyper-aware of the dangers lurking online, and I'm much more cautious about who I trust. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more discerning about who I match with, and I always meet in public places for the first few dates. What started as a normal Tuesday turned into a nightmare that I will never forget. It's a reminder that not everyone is who they seem to be, and that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most charming and normal. And now I avoid coffee shops. I still can't believe I saw a nice man on Tinder, and he turned out to be a horrible person. I don't know if I can ever trust anyone I meet on Tinder again. I'm not usually one to share stuff like this, but I'm genuinely messed up about this whole Tinder thing that happened. I'm talking like, can't sleep properly, jump at every shadow, messed up. I need to get this off my chest. And maybe, just maybe, someone else has had a similar experience and can tell me I'm not completely losing it. I'd been using Tinder for a while, casually. Swiping when I was bored, maybe going on a date or two. Nothing serious. I'm not really looking for anything serious, to be honest. Just some company, some conversation, maybe a little fun. That's all. Then I matched with this guy, Mark. He seemed pretty normal, at least from his profile. Decent pictures, a bio that wasn't trying too hard, seemed to have a good sense of humor. We started chatting, and he was actually really easy to talk to. We had a lot in common, like the same music, same movies, even the same obscure podcasts. I was actually looking forward to meeting him, which is rare for me. We made plans to meet for coffee last Tuesday. Nothing fancy, just a quick meet and greet to see if there was any actual chemistry. I got there a few minutes early, found a table outside, and waited. He showed up right on time, and he was even better looking in person. Tall, dark hair, great smile. I was instantly more attracted to him than I thought I'd be. The coffee date went great. We talked for almost 2 hours, just bouncing back and forth, laughing, making each other feel comfortable. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. There were no awkward silences, no forced conversation. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. At the end of the date, he walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. He said he had a great time and would love to see me again. I said I felt the same way, and we made tentative plans for dinner later in the week. I drove home feeling actually happy. It had been a long time since I'd felt that kind of genuine connection with someone. That's when things started to get weird. The next day, I got a text from Mark in the morning, just a simple, "Good morning. Hope you have a great day." Nothing out of the ordinary. I responded, and we chatted back and forth for a bit. Then, in the afternoon, I got another text from him. And another. And another. It started to feel like he was constantly texting me. I'd respond, but then he'd immediately send another message. It was overwhelming. I tried to politely slow things down, saying I was busy with work or errands, but he didn't seem to get the hint. He kept texting, kept calling. He started sending me pictures of what he was doing, where he was going. It felt like he was trying to keep tabs on me. I started to feel really uncomfortable. This was way too much, way too soon. I hadn't even known him for 24 hours, and he was acting like we were in a serious relationship. I decided to be direct. I texted him and said, "Hey Mark, I had a great time on our date, but I think you're coming on a little strong. I need a little space." His response was unsettling. He said, "Space? But I thought we had a connection. I thought you felt the same way I did." I replied, "I did have a good time, but it's only been one date. I need to get to know someone before I get too invested." He didn't respond to that. I thought maybe he finally got the message. But then, later that night, I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. Then another call. And another. I finally answered, and it was Mark. "Why aren't you responding to my texts?" he asked, his voice sounding strange. "I told you, Mark, I need some space." I said, "Try and stay calm." "But I miss you," he said. "I can't stop thinking about you." "Mark, this is too much. I barely know you." "But I know you," he said. "I know everything about you." That's when I started to freak out. "What do you mean? You know everything about me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I've been doing my research," he said, his voice getting lower. "You're very easy to find, you know. Social media, public records, you've left a lot of breadcrumbs." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. I was terrified. How much did he actually know about me? Where did he get all this information? I started scrolling through my social media profiles, deleting old posts, tightening my privacy settings. I felt like I was being watched. The next few days were a nightmare. I kept getting calls from unknown numbers, texts from burner phones. I changed my number, but it didn't seem to matter. He still found a way to contact me. He started emailing me, sending me messages on LinkedIn, even commenting on my old blog posts. He was relentless. His messages started to get darker. He said he knew where I lived, what car I drove, where I worked. He said he was watching me, making sure I was safe. It was full-blown stalking. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do until he actually threatened me or physically harmed me. They told me to document everything, keep a log of all the calls and messages, and to get a restraining order if things escalated. I felt completely helpless. I was trapped in my own apartment, afraid to go outside, constantly looking over my shoulder. I felt like my privacy had been completely violated, all because of a stupid Tinder date. One night, I was sitting in my living room, trying to relax, when I heard a noise outside my window. I peeked through the blinds, and I saw him. Mark was standing across the street, staring at my apartment building. He was just standing there, perfectly still, with a creepy smile on his face. I slammed the blinds shut and ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. I called the police again, frantic, telling them he was outside my apartment. They said they'd send someone over, but it would take time. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped. I grabbed a kitchen knife and hid in the closet, waiting for the police to arrive. I heard a noise at the front door. It sounded like someone was trying to pick the lock. My heart was pounding in my chest. I gripped the knife tighter, ready to defend myself. The door finally opened, and I heard footsteps inside my apartment. I held my breath, waiting for him to find me. Then I heard a voice. "Police. Is anyone there?" It was the police. They had finally arrived. They searched the apartment and found no one inside. They checked the perimeter and found no sign of Mark. He was gone. The police stayed for a while, taking my statement, searching the area. They said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood and keep an eye out for him. I haven't seen or heard from Mark since that night, but I'm still terrified. I still jump at every noise, still look over my shoulder wherever I go. I feel like he's still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I deleted Tinder, changed my number again, moved to a new apartment in a different part of town. I'm trying to rebuild my life, but it's hard. The experience has left me scarred. I don't trust anyone anymore. I'm afraid to date, afraid to even leave my apartment. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, that he's still watching me, that he'll find me again. This whole Tinder experience has taught me a valuable lesson. You never really know who you're talking to online. People can present themselves however they want, hide behind fake profiles, and manipulate you into thinking there's someone they're not. I'm sharing this story because I want people to be aware of the risks of online dating. Be careful who you match with, be careful what information you share, and always trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. I hope my story serves as a warning to others. Please be safe out there. You never know what kind of person you might encounter on Tinder, and some of them are truly terrifying. The moment I knew something was wrong was when he started asking about my dreams. Not the, "what do you want to do with your life?" kind of dreams. No, this was about the actual, literal dreams I had when I slept. It was our third date. We were sitting at this dive bar I usually loved, but tonight, the sticky tables and lukewarm beer felt ominous. Maybe it was just the way the street light was flickering outside, casting long, dancing shadows across his face. Or maybe it was the way he was looking at me, that intense, unwavering stare that usually made me feel seen, but now just felt unsettling. Up until that point, the dates had been normal. As normal as Tinder dates ever are, anyway. We matched because we both liked the same obscure indie band. Our first date was at a record store, bonding over vinyl and complaining about how mainstream music had become. Date 2 was a hike, filled with witty banter and awkward attempts to hold hands. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Thoughtful, intelligent, a little quirky, but in an endearing way. His profile wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Decent photos, a funny bio about his love for bad puns, the usual. But then came the dream questions. It started innocently enough. "Do you dream a lot?" he asked, swirling the ice in his whiskey. "Yeah, I guess," I replied, taking a sip of my beer. "Pretty vividly, actually. Sometimes they're so real, I wake up confused." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Tell me about one." I hesitated. I'm not usually one to share my dreams with people. They're personal, messy, and often make absolutely no sense. But he looked so genuinely interested, so expectant, that I found myself recounting a recent dream about being chased through a forest by a giant squirrel. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he didn't laugh or dismiss it as silly. Instead, he asked, "What did the squirrel represent?" That's when the alarm bells started ringing. What did the squirrel represent? Who says that? I shrugged, trying to play it cool. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stressed about finding an apartment. He didn't buy it. "Dreams are symbolic," he insisted. "They're a window into your subconscious. They can reveal hidden truths about yourself." The conversation continued down that rabbit hole. He kept pressing me for more details about my dreams, dissecting them, offering his own interpretations. It was like he was trying to unlock some secret code hidden within my sleeping mind. He wasn't a therapist, or a psychology major, or anything related. It was so odd. I tried to change the subject, but he kept steering it back to dreams. By the end of the night, I was exhausted and deeply uncomfortable. I made up an excuse about having an early meeting the next day and practically sprinted out of the bar. But that wasn't the end of it. The next day, I received a text from him. "I've been thinking about your squirrel dream." It read, "I think it might be related to your fear of commitment." I stared at my phone in disbelief. Who sends a text like that? Especially after I clearly tried to move past it. Was he serious? Was this some kind of weird game? I wasn't sure, but I knew I didn't like it. I didn't respond. I hoped that would be the end of it. I unmatched him on Tinder, blocked his number, and tried to forget the whole thing. But then, a week later, something even stranger happened. I woke up one morning to find a small, handwritten note slipped under my apartment door. It read, "I saw you dreaming last night." My blood ran cold. How could he have seen me dreaming? Was he watching me? Had he somehow gotten into my apartment? I called the police, but they couldn't do much. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of a crime. They suggested I install security cameras and be more careful about locking my doors. I did both of those things, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I felt like he was always just one step behind me, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to fall asleep. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him standing over me, peering into my mind, stealing my dreams. I had nightmares about giant squirrels, shadowy figures, and endless forests. I spent my days exhausted and paranoid, jumping at every sound. I confided in my best friend, Sarah. She thought I was overreacting. "Maybe he's just a weirdo," she said. "A harmless, if slightly creepy weirdo. Just ignore him, and he'll go away." But I couldn't ignore him. The notes kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. "Your dreams are getting darker." One read, "I'm worried about you." Another simply said, "I know what you're afraid of." I was terrified. I had no idea what he was capable of, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't live like this anymore. I decided to confront him. I used a fake number to message him on a burner account on Tinder, pretending to be interested in his dream interpretation. I said I wanted to meet him to discuss my own dreams. He responded almost immediately. He seemed eager to meet. We agreed to meet at a public park during the day. I told Sarah about my plan, and she reluctantly agreed to come with me, hiding nearby in case things went south. When I arrived at the park, I saw him sitting on a bench, waiting for me. He looked different than I remembered. His eyes seemed even darker, his smile even more unsettling. As I walked toward him, I noticed something strange about the park. It was eerily quiet. There were no birds singing, no children playing, no one walking their dogs. It was like the entire park was holding its breath. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I have so much to tell you about your dreams." I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "How do you know about my dreams?" I asked. "Are you stalking me?" He chuckled, a hollow, unsettling sound. Stalking is such a harsh word. I prefer to think of it as observing. I'm simply trying to help you understand yourself. You're scaring me, I said, my voice trembling. Leave me alone. He stood up, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made me want to run. I can't leave you alone, he said. We're connected. Your dreams are my dreams. Your fears are my fears. He took a step closer to me, and I instinctively recoiled. Just then, Sarah emerged from behind a tree, yelling at him to leave me alone. He turned to look at her, his expression shifting from intense to almost disappointed. You brought a friend, he said. That's not very sporting. He turned back to me. This isn't over, he said. I'll see you in your dreams. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. I never saw him again. The note stopped. The feeling of being watched faded, and I slowly started to piece my life back together. But even now, years later, I still think about him. I still wonder how he knew about my dreams, and what he meant when he said we were connected. And sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, just before I drift off to sleep, I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, watching me, waiting for me to dream. The worst part, I still use Tinder. I know, but everyone has their vices. I guess the whole thing just gave me some sort of weird fascination with the dark side of online dating. I'm just much more careful about who I match with now, and I definitely don't talk about my dreams anymore. Alright, so listen, I'm not usually one to share stuff like this, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, honestly. It's been a few months, but the whole thing was so messed up that it still feels like it just happened yesterday. I'm what you'd call a casual Tinder user. I swipe when I'm bored, match with a few people, chat a bit, maybe grab a drink if the conversation flows. Nothing serious, ever. Just a way to pass the time. Meet new people, you know? I've had my share of awkward dates and ghostings, but nothing too crazy. Until Liam. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of decent photos. One of him hiking, one at a concert, and a semi-blurry selfie. His bio said he was a writer, loved exploring new places, and was looking for someone to share adventures with. Seemed normal enough. We matched, and the conversation started easily. He was witty, intelligent, and surprisingly engaging. Not the typical, hey, WYD, kind of Tinder conversation. We talked about books, movies, travel, and even some deeper stuff, like our fears and dreams. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself looking forward to his messages. After a week of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I was a little hesitant at first. There was just something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on, but I decided to go for it. What's the worst that could happen, right? We met at a small cafe in my neighborhood. He was taller than I expected, with piercing blue eyes and a disarming smile. He was wearing a worn leather jacket and had this intense, almost brooding energy about him. I was immediately drawn to him. The coffee date went well. We talked for hours, lost in conversation. He was even more charming and charismatic in person. He told me about his writing, his travels, and his passion for exploring abandoned places. He had this way of romanticizing everything, making even the most mundane things sound exciting and mysterious. We ended up walking around the neighborhood for a while after the cafe closed. He held my hand, and it felt electric. I hadn't felt that kind of spark with someone in a long time. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went on hikes, explored hidden parks, and spent hours talking in coffee shops. He introduced me to his favorite books and movies, and I felt like I was finally connecting with someone on a deeper level. But as I got to know him better, I started noticing some strange things. He was incredibly secretive about his past. He wouldn't talk about his family, his friends, or his previous relationships. Whenever I asked him about something personal, he would deflect the question or change the subject. He also had this fascination with dark and macabre things. He loved visiting cemeteries, abandoned buildings, and haunted places. He would tell me stories about ghosts, demons, and paranormal phenomena. It was intriguing at first, but it started to feel a little unsettling after a while. One night, he took me to an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of the city. It was a crumbling, decaying building with broken windows and overgrown weeds. The air was thick with a sense of decay and despair. He led me through the dark, echoing hallways, telling me stories about the patients who had once lived there. He talked about their suffering, their madness, and their untimely deaths. He seemed almost excited by it all. I started to feel increasingly uneasy. The atmosphere was heavy and oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I told him I wanted to leave, but he insisted on showing me one more room. He led me to a small, padded cell in the basement. The walls were covered in scratches and bloodstains, and the air smelled of stale urine and disinfectant. He told me that this was where the most violent patients had been kept. He started whispering stories about the horrors that had occurred in that room. He talked about electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and other barbaric treatments. His voice was low and hypnotic, and I felt like I was being pulled into his dark world. Suddenly, he turned to me with a strange glint in his eyes. He grabbed my hand and held it tightly. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. "The energy? The pain?" I pulled my hand away and told him I wanted to leave. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't argue. We walked back to the car in silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. After that night, things started to unravel quickly. He became more distant and withdrawn. He stopped calling and texting as often, and when we did see each other, he seemed preoccupied and distracted. I tried to talk to him about it, but he wouldn't open up. He just said he was stressed about his writing and needed some space. I tried to be understanding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One day, I decided to do some research on him. I know it sounds crazy, but I was desperate to understand what was going on. I started by Googling his name, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no publications, no anything. It was like he didn't exist. I then tried searching for his writing online. He had told me he was working on a novel, so I figured I might be able to find some excerpts or short stories. But again, nothing. I started to feel increasingly paranoid. Was he even who he said he was? Was he lying to me about everything? I decided to confront him. I called him and asked if we could meet up. He hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. We met at the same cafe where we had our first date. He looked tired and drawn, with dark circles under his eyes. He seemed nervous and uncomfortable. I cut straight to the chase. I told him that I had tried to find him online and that I couldn't find anything. I asked him who he really was and what he was hiding. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and fear. He took a deep breath and said, "I should have told you sooner." He then proceeded to tell me a story that was so bizarre and unbelievable that I almost didn't believe it. He said that he was part of a secret society that worshipped ancient pagan gods. He said that they believed in sacrificing humans to appease these gods and gain power. He claimed that he had been chosen to find a suitable heir. He said that he had been watching me for weeks, studying me, and deciding whether I was worthy. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. I thought he was joking, but the look on his face was dead serious. I stood up and started to walk away. He grabbed my arm and begged me to stay. He said that he had changed his mind, that he couldn't go through with it. He said that he had fallen in love with me and that he wanted to run away with me. I didn't know what to believe. I was terrified and confused. I pulled my arm away and ran out of the cafe. I didn't stop running until I got home. I locked the doors, closed the blinds, and huddled in a corner, shaking with fear. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing noises outside, and I was convinced that he was watching me. The next day, I went to the police and told them everything. They were skeptical at first, but they took my statement and said they would look into it. They searched his apartment, but he was gone. They found some strange symbols and artifacts, but nothing concrete to link him to any crimes. I haven't seen or heard from him since. The police say he's probably just a harmless, crazy person, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching me. I deleted Tinder and all my other dating apps. I'm too scared to meet anyone new. I'm still trying to process what happened. Was he really going to hurt me? Was it all just a twisted game? I don't know, and I probably never will. But I'll never forget Liam. He was a reminder that sometimes the people you meet online are not who they seem. And sometimes the most charming and charismatic people are the ones you should be most afraid of. It's messed me up, honestly. I still get panic attacks sometimes when I'm alone at night. Every time my phone rings from an unknown number, my heart leaps into my throat. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I know it sounds crazy, but that's my Tinder horror story. And it's something I'll never forget. It's made me see the world differently. The internet, which once seemed like a place for connection and fun, now feels like a hunting ground, a place where predators can hide in plain sight. waiting for their next ertwa. I'm trying to move on, to heal, but it's hard. The trust is gone. The innocence is gone. All that's left is the lingering fear and the constant question, what if? What if I hadn't run? What if he had succeeded? It's a dark thought, I know, but it's one that I can't seem to escape. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing my story, I can help someone else avoid a similar fate. Because the truth is, you never really know who's on the other side of that screen. And sometimes, the swiping game can have deadly consequences. Looking back, I really should have seen the warning signs. They weren't subtle, not really. They were just masked by my own loneliness, my desire for connection, and, let's be honest, the superficial allure of a good-looking profile picture on Tinder. I'd been on the app for a few months, post-breakup, wading through the usual sea of gym selfies, generic bios, and guys who clearly hadn't read a word I wrote on my own profile. Then, I matched with him. Liam. His profile was different, immediately grabbing my attention. Instead of the typical shirtless pics or group shots with bros, his photos were candid, showing him in various settings. Hiking in the mountains, reading in a coffee shop, volunteering at an animal shelter. He had this kind, approachable face, with warm eyes and a genuine smile. His bio was thoughtful and well-written, talking about his love for books, nature, and deep conversations. He mentioned being a bit of an introvert, but eager to meet new people. I swiped right without hesitation. We matched almost instantly. The initial conversations were amazing. He asked me about my passions, my dreams, my fears. He listened intently, offering thoughtful responses and sharing his own experiences in return. We talked for hours each night, delving into topics that went far beyond the typical Tinder small talk. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know the real me, not just the curated version I presented online. I was smitten. I told my friends I think I may have found the one. They were happy for me, but told me to calm down because it's been a week. After a week of intense online communication, he suggested we meet in person. I was excited, but also a little nervous. We decided on a casual coffee date at a local cafe. When I saw him in person, he was even more attractive than his pictures. He had this quiet confidence about him, a gentle demeanor that put me at ease. We talked for hours, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. It felt like we had known each other for years. That's when the first subtle red flag appeared, disguised as a harmless quirk. He seemed oddly insistent on knowing my exact schedule for the next few days. He asked about my work hours, my weekend plans, and even what time I usually went to bed. I brushed it off as him just being interested in my life. But looking back, it felt like he was gathering information, establishing a baseline. The second date was at his apartment. He cooked me dinner, a delicious pasta dish with homemade sauce. He was a surprisingly good cook. The apartment was clean and well organized, but there was something sterile about it, almost like it was staged. There were no personal touches, no family photos, no artwork on the walls. It felt more like a temporary rental than a home. He asked if I lived alone, and I responded yes. He was happy to hear this and told me that he needed to be closer with me. He said he loved me, and I responded I loved him back. That night, after dinner, things got intense. He became more physically affectionate, pushing the boundaries further than I was comfortable with. I tried to gently pull away, but he persisted, becoming more forceful. I told him I wasn't ready, and he seemed disappointed but eventually backed off. He apologized profusely, saying he got carried away and didn't mean to make me uncomfortable. I accepted his apology, telling myself it was just a misunderstanding, a momentary lapse in judgment. Over the next few weeks, our relationship progressed quickly. We spent almost every night together. He was incredibly attentive, showering me with compliments, gifts, and affection. He seemed obsessed with me, wanting to know everything about my past, my thoughts, my feelings. It was flattering at first, but soon it became suffocating. The red flags started piling up, more noticeable now, harder to ignore. He became increasingly jealous and possessive, questioning me about my interactions with other people, monitoring my social media activity, and getting angry if I didn't respond to his texts immediately. He started isolating me from my friends, criticizing them, and making me feel guilty for spending time with them. He hated when I went out. He would question me where I would go, who I would be with, and who I was texting. I didn't know what to say anymore. He also had a disturbing tendency to talk about his ex-girlfriends in a derogatory way, painting them as manipulative, unfaithful, and emotionally unstable. He would tell me how lucky he was to have found me, someone who was different and genuine. It made me uneasy, wondering if he would eventually talk about me the same way. One night, I discovered a hidden folder on his computer filled with pictures of me, taken without my knowledge. Some were innocent enough, just candid shots of me laughing or reading, but others were more intimate, taken while I was sleeping or changing. I was horrified. I confronted him about it, and he became defensive, claiming he just wanted to capture my beauty and preserve our memories. He tried to convince me it was a sign of his love, not a violation of my privacy. I tried to break up with him then, but he wouldn't let me. He became incredibly emotional, begging me to stay, promising to change, threatening to hurt himself if I left him. I was scared and manipulated, and I reluctantly agreed to give him another chance. He went into therapy, and I thought that he could change. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. He was on his best behavior, showering me with affection and attention. He seemed genuinely remorseful for his past actions, but underneath the surface, I could sense a simmering rage, a dark undercurrent that made me constantly on edge. One evening, I came home from work to find him waiting for me in my apartment. He had a key, which he had secretly copied without my permission. He claimed he wanted to surprise me, but I knew it was another attempt to control me. We argued, and he became increasingly agitated. He started yelling, accusing me of lying to him, of seeing other people behind his back. I told him to leave, but he refused. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightening, and started pulling me towards him. I struggled, trying to break free, but he was too strong. He pinned me against the wall, his eyes filled with a terrifying intensity. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You're mine, and I won't let you go." I was trapped, terrified, and convinced that he was going to hurt me. I don't know what possessed me. I started to yell as loud as I could. I yelled and yelled. He put his hand over my mouth. That's when I finally snapped. I kneed him in the groin hard. He doubled over in pain, releasing his grip on me. I didn't hesitate. I ran to the door, unlocked it, and fled into the hallway. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my neighbor's apartment. I told her everything, sobbing uncontrollably. She called the police, who arrived within minutes. They arrested him and took him into custody. I pressed charges and obtained a restraining order. It took months of therapy to recover from the emotional trauma. I had nightmares, panic attacks, and a constant fear of being alone. I struggled to trust anyone, convinced that every man I met was hiding a dark secret. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored, the warning signs I dismissed. His intense attention, his jealousy, his possessiveness, his controlling behavior, they were all glaring indicators of his true nature. But I was so blinded by my own desire for love and connection that I failed to see him for who he really was. Now, I'm much more cautious about who I let into my life. I trust my instincts, and I don't ignore the warning signs. I've learned that true love is not about obsession or control, but about respect, trust, and mutual support. And I know that no matter how lonely I may feel, I'm better off alone than with someone who is capable of causing me harm. I learned that apps such as Tinder do not show real life and can contain dangerous people. The buzz of my phone jolted me awake. 11:03 a.m. Sunday. Ugh. I slapped at the snooze button, but a persistent little notification icon kept winking at me from the corner of the screen. Fine, I thought. Let's get this over with. It was Tinder. Of course it was Tinder. I'd been swiping aimlessly for weeks, a habit I'd picked up during a particularly dull patch at work. Mostly it was a distraction, a little ego boost when someone matched, a momentary escape from the monotony of spreadsheets and conference calls. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just something different. The notification read, "Liam has super liked you." A super like? Okay, that was new. I rarely got those. Curiosity piqued. I tapped on his profile. Liam, 28, writer, obsessed with coffee and rainy days. His pictures were interesting. Not conventionally handsome, but definitely intriguing. He had this kind of brooding intensity in his eyes, like he was constantly wrestling with some deep, unspoken secret. One photo showed him leaning against a brick wall, a half-smoked cigarette dangling from his lips. Another was a close-up of his hands, stained with ink. Artsy, in a slightly pretentious way. But something about him drew me in. Maybe it was the writer thing. I'd always been a sucker for creative types. Or maybe it was just the fact that he'd super liked me. Whatever it was, I swiped right. Instant match. A message popped up almost immediately. "Hey, I'm guessing you're also a fan of super likes." I chuckled. Guilty as charged. What made me worthy of such a prestigious honor? "Your profile. It's different. You seem like you actually have a personality." "Okay, smooth. I like this guy." We chatted for a few hours that afternoon, discovering a shared love of obscure films, vintage bookstores, and strong opinions about pineapple on pizza. A hard no from both of us. He was witty, intelligent, and surprisingly thoughtful. He even asked about my work, which was a refreshing change from the usual Tinder small talk. By the evening, we'd made plans to meet for coffee the following day. A Monday coffee date? Bold move, Liam. I went to bed that night with a flutter of excitement in my stomach. Maybe this Tinder thing wasn't such a waste of time after all. Monday arrived, and I found myself spending an embarrassing amount of time picking out my outfit. I wanted to look casual but cute, effortlessly cool but also approachable. I finally settled on a pair of jeans, a comfortable sweater, and my favorite boots. I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, my heart doing a little tap dance in my chest. I scanned the crowd, trying to spot Liam's face, and then I saw him. He was sitting at a table near the window, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked even more intriguing in person. The brooding intensity was still there, but it was softened by a hint of vulnerability. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and a way of moving that was both graceful and slightly awkward. He stood up as I approached, and we greeted each other with a tentative hug. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy. The coffee date was amazing. We talked for hours, losing track of time in our conversation. He told me about his writing, his dreams of publishing a novel, his struggles with self-doubt. I told him about my job, my frustrations with office politics, my secret desire to open a bakery. We laughed. We debated. We shared stories and secrets. It felt like we'd known each other for years. As the afternoon wore on, the coffee shop started to empty out. We were the last two people there, still engrossed in conversation. "I don't want this to end," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Me neither," I replied, my cheeks flushed. "Want to go for a walk?" I hesitated for a moment. It was getting late, and I had work the next day. But I couldn't resist the pull I felt towards him. "Okay," I said. "Let's go for a walk." We strolled through the city streets, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. The air was crisp and cool, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. It felt like we were the only two people in the world. As we walked, he started telling me about a project he was working on, a new novel. He said it was a dark and twisted story, a psychological thriller about a woman who was being stalked. He described the plot in vivid detail, painting a chilling picture of paranoia and fear. I found myself growing increasingly uneasy as he spoke. The story was disturbing, and his enthusiasm for it was unsettling. "It's just fiction, right?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. He stopped walking and turned to face me. His eyes were dark and intense, and his smile was gone. "Fiction," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Who says it's fiction?" A shiver ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer to me, his eyes boring into mine. "I mean, sometimes the best stories are the ones that are based on reality." I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're scaring me," I said. He reached out and gently touched my face. "Don't be scared," he said. "I would never hurt you." But his eyes told a different story. I pulled away from him and started walking faster. "I have to go," I said. "I have to get home." He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, watching me walk away, a strange smile playing on his lips. I practically ran all the way back to my apartment, my mind racing. What had just happened? Was he serious? Was he really stalking someone? I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a weird writer with a vivid imagination. But the look in his eyes, I couldn't shake it off. I locked my door, drew the curtains, and curled up on the couch, trying to calm my nerves. I decided to watch a movie, something light and fluffy, to take my mind off things. But I couldn't concentrate. Every little noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see Liam standing there, watching me. Around midnight, I finally drifted off to sleep. I woke up with a start. The apartment was dark and silent. But something felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest, and listened intently. And then I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the window. I froze, paralyzed with fear. The scratching continued, growing louder and more insistent. It sounded like someone was trying to get in. Slowly, cautiously, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. I pointed it towards the window, my hand trembling. And then I saw him. Liam was standing outside my window, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes wide and unblinking. He was holding something in his hand, something long and sharp. A knife. I screamed. He smiled. He raised the knife and began to scratch at the glass, slowly, deliberately, making a sickening screeching sound. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the door, fumbling with the lock. I managed to get it open and burst out of the apartment, screaming for help. I ran down the hallway, pounding on doors, begging someone to call the police. Finally, a neighbor opened their door and pulled me inside. I collapsed on their couch, sobbing and shaking, as they called 911. The police arrived within minutes. They searched my apartment and the surrounding area, but Liam was gone. He'd vanished without a trace. They took me to the police station to give a statement. I told them everything that had happened, from the Tinder match to the coffee date, to the scratching at the window. They listened patiently, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They thought I was just a crazy woman who had imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I had seen. I knew that Liam was out there, somewhere, and that he was dangerous. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant fear. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and carried pepper spray everywhere I went. I avoided going out alone, and I slept with a knife under my pillow. I never heard from Liam again, but I never forgot him either. His face, his eyes, his chilling smile, they were burned into my memory. To this day, I still check my locks 3 times before bed. I still jump at every little noise. And I still avoid Tinder like the plague. What started as a normal day, a harmless swipe on a dating app, turned into a nightmare that I'll never be able to escape. It wasn't just a bad date. It was a brush with something dark, something sinister. And it taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones you meet online. So, listen, I need to tell you something that happened to me. Something that makes me check the locks every night and second-guess every friendly face. It's about Tinder, and it's a cautionary tale, so buckle up. I wasn't really looking for love, okay? I was bored, lonely after a bad breakup, and honestly, just wanted some validation. Tinder seemed like the easiest way to get it. Swipe, match, chat, maybe grab a coffee. Low stakes, minimal effort. I wasn't stupid, though. I knew the risks. I knew about catfishing and creeps. I thought I was being careful. I really did. My profile was pretty standard. A few decent pictures, good lighting is key, people. A witty bio about my love for hiking and hating Mondays, and a clear statement that I wasn't looking for anything serious. I swiped right on guys who seemed normal. Guys with friendly smiles, decent jobs, and no shirtless bathroom selfies. I thought I had a good radar for spotting the weirdos. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was intriguing. He had this intense, almost brooding look in his pictures. Not like an I'm trying to be mysterious look, but more like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His bio was short and cryptic, looking for connection, art, music, and deep conversations. Okay, a little pretentious, maybe, but I was drawn to it. I was tired of the same old vapid small talk. We started chatting, and he was different. He didn't ask the usual questions about my job or hobbies. He asked about my dreams, my fears, my biggest regrets. He listened, really listened, and responded with thoughtful, insightful answers. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me on a deeper level. I know. Red flags should have been waving like crazy, but I was caught up in it. He made me feel seen, understood, and special. It was intoxicating. He was also incredibly attractive, in a dark, unconventional way. Think Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights meets a struggling musician. We talked for hours every day for about a week before he suggested meeting up. He didn't suggest a bar or a coffee shop. He suggested a walk in the woods. Now, I'm not an idiot. I knew this was a bit of a weird suggestion, especially for a first date with someone I met on Tinder. But he was so persuasive, so insistent that we needed to connect in nature, away from the distractions of the city. He painted this beautiful picture of us walking through the trees, talking about life, and finding a deeper connection. And I bought it. I told a friend where I was going and who I was meeting, sent her his picture and profile, and told her to call me every hour. I even shared my location with her. I thought I was being smart. The day of the date, I drove to the trailhead he suggested. It was a popular hiking spot, so I figured it would be safe enough. He was already there when I arrived, leaning against his car, looking even more brooding and intense in person. The walk started out okay. We talked about art, music, and philosophy, just like he promised. He was incredibly articulate and knowledgeable, and I found myself drawn into his way of thinking. But as we walked deeper into the woods, the conversation started to shift. He started asking me about my past relationships, about the men who had hurt me, about the things I regretted. He was probing, digging, trying to uncover my deepest vulnerabilities. It made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it off as him just being intense. Then he started talking about control, about how people are always trying to control each other, about how society is a system of control, about how the only way to truly be free is to break free from all of it. His voice was low and intense, and his eyes were burning into mine. I started to get really nervous. This wasn't the deep conversation I had signed up for. This was something else entirely. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept pushing, kept probing, kept talking about control and freedom and breaking free. I started to feel like I was trapped, like I couldn't escape his intense gaze and his unsettling words. And then he stopped walking. We were deep in the woods now, far from the trailhead, far from anyone else. The trees were tall and thick, blocking out the sunlight. It was quiet, too quiet, except for the sound of my own heart pounding in my chest. He turned to me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "Like there's someone always watching you, judging you, controlling you. Do you ever feel that way?" "Sometimes," I admitted, feeling a shiver run down my spine. He smiled a slow, unsettling smile. "That's because you are," he said. "We all are. We're all being watched, controlled, manipulated." "By who?" I asked, my voice trembling. He stepped closer to me, his face inches from mine. "By them," he whispered. "The ones who are always watching. The ones who control everything." I didn't know what he was talking about, but I knew I needed to get away from him. "I have to go," I stammered, turning to walk back the way we came. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "No," he said, his voice hard. "You're not going anywhere." I tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "Let go of me," I yelled, my voice rising in panic. "I can't," he said, his eyes burning into mine. "You need to understand. You need to see the truth." He started ranting about conspiracies, about secret societies, about government control, about aliens. It was a jumbled mess of paranoia and delusion. I realized then that he wasn't just intense. He was insane. I struggled against him, trying to break free, but he was too strong. He pulled me closer, his grip tightening on my arm. I could feel his breath on my face, hot and ragged. "I'm going to show you the truth," he whispered, his voice filled with a disturbing mix of desperation and excitement. "I'm going to free you from their control." I screamed. Luckily, someone heard me. A couple of hikers came crashing through the trees, yelling and shouting. Liam froze, his eyes widening in surprise. He released my arm and stumbled back, his face a mask of confusion and fear. The hikers rushed towards me, their faces filled with concern. "Are you okay?" one of them asked. "What's going on?" I didn't say anything. I just pointed at Liam, my body trembling with fear. The hikers confronted him, demanding to know what he was doing. He started rambling again, about conspiracies and control and the truth. The hikers exchanged worried glances and pulled out their phones to call the police. Liam panicked. He turned and ran, disappearing into the trees. The hikers stayed with me until the police arrived. I told them everything that had happened, my voice still shaking with fear. They took my statement and launched a search for Liam. They found him a few hours later, hiding in a cave a few miles from the trailhead. He was arrested and charged with assault and kidnapping. I testified against him in court. He was found guilty and sentenced to several years in prison. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. A few weeks after the trial, I started receiving strange emails. They were anonymous, untraceable, and filled with the same paranoid rantings that Liam had spouted in the woods. They were signed The Watchers. I changed my email address, but the emails kept coming. They were getting more frequent, more threatening. I started to feel like I was being watched again, like someone was always there, lurking in the shadows. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and went into hiding. I cut off contact with most of my friends and family, afraid that they would be targeted too. I still live in fear, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if the Watchers will find me again. I haven't used Tinder since. I haven't dated anyone. I'm too afraid to trust anyone. This is my cautionary tale. Be careful who you meet online. Be careful who you trust. Because sometimes, the person you think you know is hiding something dark and dangerous. And sometimes, the truth is more terrifying than you can imagine. And remember, even if you think you're being careful, even if you tell your friends, even if you share your location, it might not be enough. Some people are just too good at hiding their true selves. Some people are just too dangerous. So please be careful. Your life might depend on it. Okay, buckle up, because this Tinder story isn't just a bad date or some awkward encounter. This is the kind of story that makes you want to delete all dating apps and swear off human interaction forever. It happened last summer. I was feeling restless, recently single, bored, and convinced that swiping was the answer to all my problems. I know. Classic. I was using Tinder, Bumble, the whole shebang. Mostly striking out, but I did match with a guy named David. David was different. Not immediately red flag different, more like intriguing different. His profile was minimalist. One picture, a blurry shot of him, standing in front of what looked like an art gallery. No bio, just his name and age. Normally, I'd swipe left on something that vague, but something about the picture caught my eye. It was the way he was standing, I guess. Still, almost like he was trying not to be seen. I messaged him first, something simple like, "Interesting photo. What kind of art do you like?" He replied almost instantly, and that's where things started to get off. His messages were long, rambling, and intensely personal. He talked about his anxieties, his fears, his dreams, all within the first few messages. It was like he was dumping his entire soul onto me right away. I was a little taken aback, but also flattered. He was being so vulnerable, so open. It felt like we were connecting on a deep level right away. We talked for hours that first night, and for the next few days. It was constant. Texting, voice notes, even the occasional video call. He was charming, intelligent, and incredibly attentive. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. He even remembered the smallest details about my life, things I'd mentioned in passing. It was intoxicating. After about a week of this intense online courtship, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant. It all felt so fast, so intense. But he was so persuasive, so insistent, that I eventually caved. He suggested we go for a hike in a state park about an hour outside the city. I'm a big hiker, so it seemed like a good idea. Plus, meeting in broad daylight, in a public place, felt safer than going to some random bar. I told a few friends about my plans, sent them his picture, and shared my location. You know, the usual safety precautions. The day of the hike, I was nervous but also excited. I packed my backpack, laced up my hiking boots, and drove out to the park. David was already there when I arrived, waiting at the trailhead. He looked different in person than he did in his blurry photo. Taller, thinner, with intense, dark eyes that seemed to look right through me. He was wearing hiking gear, but it looked brand new, like he'd never actually worn it before. We started hiking, and the conversation flowed easily at first. He asked about my life, my goals, my dreams. He seemed genuinely interested, but as we got deeper into the park, the conversation started to shift. He started talking about his past, about his ex-girlfriend, about how she had betrayed him. His voice got lower, his tone more intense. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to his ex. He started saying things like, "You're not like her, are you? You wouldn't hurt me like she did, would you?" It was making me uncomfortable, but I tried to brush it off as him just being insecure. We reached a scenic overlook, a cliff with a breathtaking view of the valley below. We stopped to take a break, and David sat down on a rock, staring out at the view. I stood next to him, trying to enjoy the scenery, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He was silent for a long time, and then he turned to me, His eyes filled with an intensity that scared me. "I need to show you something," he said, his voice low and gravelly. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened the box, and inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a lock of hair. A long, blonde lock of hair. "This is hers," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I keep it with me always, to remind me never to trust anyone again." I stared at the lock of hair, my heart pounding in my chest. This was not normal. This was way beyond insecure. This was creepy. I started to back away, slowly. "David, I think I should go," I said, my voice trembling. He stood up, blocking my path. "No, please don't go," he said, his eyes pleading. "I just wanted to show you how much I trust you." "I need to leave," I said, more firmly this time. I tried to push past him, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Please, just stay a little longer," he said, his voice rising. "I need you." I panicked. I pulled my arm away from him and started running, back the way we had come. I could hear him behind me, yelling my name, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from him. I eventually made it back to the trailhead, where my car was parked. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sped away. I didn't stop until I was back in the city, safe in my apartment. I called the police, but they couldn't do anything. He hadn't technically done anything wrong. It was just a weird encounter, they said. I blocked David on all my social media accounts and deleted Tinder. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few weeks later, I started getting strange emails. Emails with no subject line, just a single sentence in the body. Sentences like, "I miss you," and "I'm watching you," and "I know where you live." I changed my email address, but the emails kept coming. I started seeing him everywhere, or at least I thought I did. A glimpse of him in a crowd, a figure standing across the street, a car that looked like it's parked down the block. I couldn't be sure if it was really him, or if I was just being paranoid, but the feeling of being watched was constant. One night, I woke up to a noise outside my apartment window. I peeked through the blinds and saw him standing there, on the sidewalk, staring up at my window. He was holding a sign. The sign said, "I just want to talk." I screamed and ran to the back of my apartment, calling the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. But they found the sign, and they found something else. They found a footprint in the flower bed beneath my window, a footprint that matched the hiking boots he'd been wearing on our hike. That was enough for them to take it seriously. They issued a restraining order and started patrolling my neighborhood. I haven't seen him since, but I still get the emails, and I still feel like I'm being watched. I don't know if he's still out there, waiting for me, or if he's moved on to someone else, but I know that I'll never feel safe again. I learned a valuable lesson that day, a lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting your gut. But most of all, I learned that sometimes the people you meet online are not who they seem, and that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight. I still get scared thinking what could have happened on that cliff. I swear, I'm still trying to piece together what happened last summer. It's like a twisted movie reel playing on repeat in my head, always grainy, always unsettling. It all started, predictably, on Tinder. I was bored, restless, freshly single after a messy breakup, and looking for something, anything really, to distract me from the gaping hole in my life that my ex had left. I wasn't looking for love, definitely not commitment, just a connection maybe, a distraction, a warm body, a conversation that lasted longer than a few texts. So there I was, swiping through the endless parade of faces, judging people based on a handful of photos and a pithy bio. It's a shallow game, I know, but we all play it. And then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. Not the generic gym selfie. Holding a fish, travel pic, kind of different. It was curated. A black and white photo of him reading in a dimly lit cafe. A close-up of his hands playing the piano. He had long, elegant fingers. A candid shot of him laughing with friends at a bonfire. He was undeniably attractive, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, a chiseled jawline that could cut glass. But it was more than just his looks. There was an air of mystery about him, an intelligence that radiated from his photos. His bio was short and intriguing. Seeking genuine connections. Let's discuss art, philosophy, and the meaning of life over a bottle of wine. I swiped right, of course, and to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. Our conversation started slow, cautious. We talked about books, movies, music. He introduced me to artists I'd never heard of, philosophers I'd never read. He was articulate, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my opinions. It was refreshing, intoxicating even. I found myself looking forward to his messages, eagerly awaiting his responses. He made me feel seen, understood, like I was more than just a face on a screen. After a week of intense texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a small, intimate wine bar downtown, one I'd never been to before. I was hesitant at first. I'd had my fair share of Tinder disappointments. The guys who looked nothing like their pictures. The ones who couldn't hold a conversation. The ones who were clearly just looking for a hookup. But there was something about Liam that felt different. I couldn't shake the feeling that this could be something special. So I said yes. The wine bar was tucked away on a quiet side street, dimly lit and atmospheric. Liam was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the corner. He looked even more striking in person. He stood up as I approached, a warm smile on his face, and pulled out a chair for me. The date started out perfectly. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our passions, our dreams, our fears. He listened intently, making me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was charming, witty, and incredibly intelligent. He even remembered my favorite wine and ordered a bottle for us to share. But as the night wore on, things started to shift. He started asking more personal questions, probing deeper into my past. He wanted to know about my previous relationships, my insecurities, my deepest secrets. At first, I was flattered by his interest, but then it started to feel invasive, like he was trying to dissect me, to understand me on a level that felt uncomfortable. He also started talking about himself, but not in the same way. He was vague, evasive, refusing to reveal any concrete details about his life. He danced around questions about his job, his family, his friends. He spoke in metaphors and riddles, leaving me more confused than enlightened. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to nerves or a quirky personality. But the unease continued to grow. There was something about his eyes, a darkness that seemed to flicker beneath the surface, a hint of something unsettling. As we were leaving the bar, he offered to walk me home. I hesitated. I lived alone, and the thought of inviting him back to my apartment made me uneasy. But I didn't want to seem rude, so I reluctantly agreed. The walk was silent, the only sound the click of our shoes on the pavement. He stayed close, too close, his hand brushing against mine. I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. When we reached my apartment building, I quickly said goodnight and fumbled for my keys. He stopped me, placing his hand on my arm. "I had a really nice time tonight," he said, his voice low and husky. "Me too," I replied, trying to sound enthusiastic, but my voice wavered slightly. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine. I could feel his breath on my skin. "Can I come up?" he whispered. I froze. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to say no, to slam the door in his face and run, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was afraid of hurting his feelings, of being seen as prudish or uptight. I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with those piercing blue eyes. I could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of his gaze bearing down on me. Finally, I relented. "Okay," I whispered, "but just for a little while." It was the biggest mistake of my life. I won't go into detail about what happened that night. It's too painful, too humiliating. But I will say that it wasn't consensual. It wasn't what I wanted, and it left me feeling violated and ashamed. The next morning, he was gone. He didn't leave a note, didn't send a text, just vanished without a trace. I tried to block the number, but the damage was done. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of grief and self-blame. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. I replayed the night over and over in my head, wondering what I could have done differently, what I could have said to prevent it from happening. I didn't report it to the police. I was too ashamed, too afraid of being judged. I didn't want to relive the experience, to subject myself to the scrutiny of strangers. Instead, I tried to bury it, to pretend it never happened. But the memories kept resurfacing, haunting me in my dreams, poisoning my waking hours. Then, a few months later, I saw him again. I was scrolling through Tinder, mindlessly swiping, when his face popped up on my screen. He had a new profile, a different name, but it was him. I recognized those piercing blue eyes, that chiseled jawline, that same air of unsettling mystery. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to swipe left, to block him, to erase him from my existence. But something stopped me. A morbid curiosity, perhaps, or a desire for revenge. I swiped right, and we matched. Again. He messaged me almost immediately. "I think we've met before," he wrote, followed by a winking emoji. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. I was torn between wanting to confront him, to expose him for what he was, and wanting to run as far away as possible. But then I noticed something else. In the background of one of his pictures, I saw a familiar object. A small, antique music box, one that I had given to my ex-boyfriend years ago. My blood ran cold. My ex and I had broken up years ago, and he had moved to a different state. I had no idea he was even in the same city as me. I started digging, searching through his social media profiles, trying to find a connection between him and Liam. And then I found it. A photo of them together, posing arm in arm, smiling. They were friends. Or something more. I realized then that it wasn't a coincidence. It was all planned. They had targeted me, manipulated me, and used me for their own twisted game. I still don't know why they did it. I don't know what they wanted. All I know is that they shattered my trust, violated my body, and left me with scars that may never heal. I deleted Tinder that day, and I haven't looked back since. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, to piece together the fragments of my memory, to understand how I could have been so blind. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again, but I'm determined to heal, to reclaim my life, and to move forward, even if it's one painful step at a time. The worst part is, I keep wondering who else they did this to. Who else is out there, carrying the same scars, haunted by the same memories? And how do we stop them from doing it again? I still wake up in a cold sweat, fearing I will see his face again. Okay, so I've always been a little jumpy. I wouldn't say paranoid, but definitely someone who overthinks things. I triple-check the locks, I side-eye strangers on the street, and I definitely don't leave my drink unattended at bars. I always chalked it up to growing up in the city and watching too many true crime documentaries. Tinder was a weird space for me. Part of me loved the convenience, being able to scope out potential dates from the comfort of my couch. The other part of me felt like I was walking into a potential trap every time I swiped right. It was that meeting strangers from the internet fear amplified. I'd scroll through profiles, judging everything from their blurry group photos to their questionable taste in music, all while wondering if I was about to accidentally match with a serial killer. I'd had my fair share of awkward Tinder dates, the kind where you spend the entire time mentally calculating how quickly you can politely make your escape. There was the guy who spent the whole evening talking about his crypto investments, the one who brought a Rubik's Cube to the bar and solved it in under a minute. Impressive, but also a bit much. And the one who claimed to be a professional dog whisperer. But none of them ever truly scared me. Annoyed, sure. Bored, definitely. But never genuinely afraid. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was simple. A few decent pictures, mostly outdoorsy shots, hiking, camping, etc. A short bio that said he was an architect and loved exploring new places, and an overall vibe that felt normal. Refreshingly normal, actually, compared to the usual parade of gym selfies and shirtless bathroom mirror pics. We started chatting, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my favorite books. He wasn't overly flirty, but he was definitely engaging. After a week or so of messaging, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small cafe near my apartment, which I appreciated. It felt less like a formal date and more like a casual hang. He was exactly as he looked in his pictures, tall, kind of rugged, with a genuinely warm smile. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was easy to talk to, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. By the end of the date, I was actually feeling optimistic. Maybe this Tinder thing could actually work, I thought. We went on a few more dates over the next couple of weeks. We tried new restaurants, went for walks in the park, even saw a movie. He was always a perfect gentleman, respectful, attentive, and genuinely enjoyable to be around. I started to let my guard down, to relax and actually enjoy myself. I even started to tell my friends about him, which is something I usually avoid doing until I'm absolutely sure about someone. But then the little things started. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I would be. Once, I was grabbing lunch with a friend at a small cafe downtown, and he just happened to walk by. He said he was in the area for a meeting and decided to pop in and say hi. It was a little strange, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. Another time, I was at a bookstore browsing for a new read, and he showed up again. He said he loved that bookstore and always came there to find new architecture books. Again, a little odd, but not necessarily alarming. Then the messages started getting intense. He'd text me at all hours of the day, just to say he was thinking about me or that he missed me. It was sweet at first, but it quickly became overwhelming. He'd get upset if I didn't respond immediately, or if I told him I was busy. He started asking more and more questions about my schedule, my friends, my family. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was just being paranoid. He was probably just really into me, right? Maybe he was just a little insecure. I didn't want to overreact and ruin something that could potentially be good. But the feeling of unease kept growing. One night, I was talking to my friend Sarah about Liam. I was telling her about the random appearances and the constant messages, trying to play it off like it was no big deal. But Sarah wasn't buying it. "That's not normal, my name," she said, her voice serious. "That sounds like textbook stalking behavior." I scoffed. "Stalking? Come on, Sarah. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" "Is it? He's showing up at places you haven't told him you'd be. He's constantly messaging you and getting upset when you don't respond. He's asking about your schedule and your friends. That's not just being into you. That's controlling and obsessive." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I knew she was right, deep down. I had just been trying to ignore the warning signs, hoping they would go away on their own. But hearing Sarah say it out loud made it impossible to deny. "Okay, maybe you're right," I admitted. "But what do I do? I can't just accuse him of stalking me. I don't have any proof." "Start documenting everything," Sarah advised. "Keep track of when he messages you, where he shows up, what he says. And tell someone you trust. Don't keep this to yourself." I took her advice. I started keeping a log of all of Liam's messages and appearances. It was alarming how quickly the list grew. He was texting me dozens of times a day, showing up at my gym, my favorite coffee shop, even outside my apartment building. One afternoon, I was walking home from work when I noticed Liam walking behind me. I hadn't told him I was leaving work early, and he definitely didn't work in that area. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. He quickened his pace too. I ducked into a crowded store, hoping to lose him in the crowd. I waited inside for what felt like an eternity, peering out the window to see if he was still there. When I finally emerged, he was gone. I ran the rest of the way home, my hands shaking. I locked the door behind me and immediately called Sarah. "He was following me," I said, my voice trembling. "I saw him. He was definitely following me." "Okay, you need to go to the police," Sarah said firmly. "This has gone too far. You have enough evidence now." I hesitated. I still didn't want to believe that Liam was capable of something like this. But I knew Sarah was right. I had to do something. The police were surprisingly helpful. They took my statement, reviewed my log of messages and appearances, and agreed that Liam's behavior was cause for concern. They even offered to send a patrol car by my apartment a few times a day, just to keep an eye on things. The next day, I got a text from Liam. "Why are the police at your apartment?" it read. "What did you tell them?" I didn't respond. I blocked his number and deleted him from all my social media accounts. I was terrified, but also relieved that I had finally taken action. I thought I was safe. I thought that blocking him and reporting him to the police would be enough to scare him away. I was wrong. A week later, I came home from work to find my apartment door ajar. My heart stopped. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. Everything seemed normal at first, but then I noticed it. A single red rose lying on my kitchen counter. I picked it up, my hands trembling. There was a small note attached to the stem. "I know you're scared," it read, "but I just want to protect you. I'll always be watching over you." That's when I saw it. A security camera, hidden in the corner, pointing directly at my living room. I ripped the camera off the wall, my hands shaking with rage and fear. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop running until I reached the police station. I told them everything. About the rose, the note, the camera. They took it all seriously this time. They obtained a warrant to search Liam's apartment. What they found there was horrifying. A wall covered in pictures of me, my apartment building, my workplace, my friends, my family, a detailed log of my daily routines, my habits, my movements, a collection of news articles about stalking and harassment cases, and a hidden room filled with surveillance equipment pointed directly at a live feed of my apartment. Liam was arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, and unlawful surveillance. He's currently awaiting trial. I moved out of my apartment immediately. I changed my phone number again, deleted all my social media accounts, and started seeing a therapist. I still struggle with the fear and the anxiety. I still jump at every shadow, every unexpected noise. I still triple-check the locks and side-eye strangers on the street. But I'm also learning to trust my instincts, to listen to that inner voice that tells me when something is wrong, to not be afraid to ask for help. I thought I was being paranoid before, but now I know that sometimes your worst fears are justified. Sometimes the danger is real, and sometimes the only way to survive is to trust your gut, even when it tells you something you don't want to hear. Tinder is a game. It's a lottery. And sometimes you don't win money. You win a nightmare. And you think you are being paranoid until you aren't anymore. Until you have a single rose with a note laying on the counter.